Welcome, Power Painters. This is Taylor here, and I'm going to be walking you through my full process for starting a sketch and bringing it to full color in this final lesson of the beginner painting course. Now, this lesson is sped up about 800%, so that's about 8 times faster than I normally draw or paint. And the reason for that is because the full course is actually complete with 8 weeks worth of lessons, one lesson per week, and an assignment at the end of each lesson. This is the final lesson in the course that you're seeing right now, where I start with a drawing and I'm going to bring it to a finished sketch with color. So if you want to know how to do that in a very easy and succinct way, backed by all these strong painting fundamentals, then I highly recommend you check out the course. The link is in the description box below the video, or if you're watching this on maybe Tumblr or Facebook, I'll have a link in whatever description box there is with the video if you're interested in the course. But yeah, basically this whole course works on drawing, values, edges, and color. And then in this final video, we take all of that and we bring it full circle and wrap it up into one process that you can use for all of your drawing and painting endeavors. So what I'm doing here, I'm just going to talk you through it even though it's going super fast. The actual one is about 2 hours long in real time, so you can see every detail, every move I make. But for this preview and demonstration, I feel like the speed is appropriate. So all you see me doing right now is laying in my composition. I have a rough figure sketch and a background, and I'm going in with the lasso tool and I'm contouring the edges. Just going in and ensuring that I'm going to have a nice flat character to be able to paint on. And then I start adding value. You see, we're going from drawing to values, and values are how we measure black to white, and it's a spectrum where there's a bunch of gray in between. And we use values to arrange elements on the picture plane in a way that allows us to have contrast. So values are incredibly important when it comes to drawing and painting. There's a whole 2 weeks worth of lesson on values in the full course. So what I'm doing now is starting with the figure and ensuring that I have those values laid in, popping in a couple occlusions here and there, and making the decision to start working on the background now at this point. And that just means enough value contrast so the figure pops forward. And we work on the back mountain, we work on the ground plane, and just kind of rough all of it in. And I use the lasso tool because it's an easy selection and I'm thinking graphically, I'm thinking in terms of the elements and the composition. And I talk more at length about this in the full course, but basically what I'm doing is just creating some hard edges and some soft edges and some graphic shapes that I can use to frame my character and format how I'm going to be presenting this information on the picture plane, on the canvas. Yeah, the full extent of what I'm doing is now figuring out light and shadow and changing the shapes a little bit because it felt a little closed off on that other side, and just adding a couple more elements, creating a bit more interest because we want our figure to be framed by some interesting elements. And then I go in and I begin to start using various adjustment layers to add color. Now, I show you several different ways to add color in the course. This is just one of them. If you're starting any kind of process and you started in grayscale, it's really, really good for focusing mostly on the drawing issues and the value issues and just making sure you have as few of those as possible before you move forward, because it's going to be absolutely integral that your drawing is strong, or at least clear enough for you to read so that when you're painting you don't get lost and you make things muddy. Because when we're confused and when we're in a place where we don't understand what we're doing on the canvas, that is a really frustrating place to be. And one of my biggest aims with the beginner painting course is to give you that succinct process that allows you to go from a drawing to a full color, finished sketch. It's not an illustration per se because it only took about a little under 2 hours, but it's a really nice way to just get a good speed paint out and have a solid basis for it. I talk a lot about edges in the course as well, which are a really important fundamental to all visual art. Edges are how we're going to be separating and adding interest in terms of the contours of the figure, in terms of the planes, in terms of our mark making. And we really go into a lot of that. There's, like I said, 2 weeks worth of drawing, 2 weeks worth of values, and 2 weeks worth of edges, and finally we wrap up with 2 weeks worth of color with an assignment for each. So what I'm doing here now is just refining the drawing a little bit, adding some more detail to the figure, and making it feel like there's more design. The base drawing was strong enough, but it's always good to go in and add some more details. I talk about breaking up shapes because shapes to me are drawing. I mean, there's line drawing and there's mass drawing, and I make that distinction really well in the full lesson on the first 2 weeks. But as a quick synopsis, line drawing focuses on contour and lines, whereas mass drawing focuses more on shape and using value and bigger blobs. And when you're breaking up your shapes, you want to be able to go from your largest masses first, and then go to your middle sized masses, and finally your finite details. So that's kind of how we parse our shapes on the picture plane, and that's how we can figure out where we're going to be putting various elements, because we want to work the largest ones in first, make sure those are working, and then size down gradually. Adding color here, I'm using a selective color adjustment layer as well as a curves adjustment layer, and switching that to R, G, and B. So playing with the reds, the greens, and the blues, and that gives me a solid basis for color, whereas before I had none. Now I have just sort of this nice, warm, cool, chromatic palette, and it's a lot of browns and blues, which I find are just really easy to work with. Whenever I approach color, I think of it predominantly in terms of temperature and value. So how dark and light are things on the picture plane, and how can I assign color to those darks and lights in order to create interest and contrast. So in terms of color temperature, that just means, is it a warm color, is it a cool color, is it a red, or is it a blue? And we always want to be playing with those contrasts. That's why I use sort of a warm desaturated brown, and the rest is a fair amount of blue, a lot of like a good grayish blue. So yeah, in essence, this is a really nice process to follow, because you have a full character silhouette that you can just paint on and not worry about the background, and you can refine the silhouette very easily just by going back to the character layer and brushing out the elements you don't need. And it's just a nice workflow, especially if you plan on going professional, because you'll have a lot of layers to work with and not too many layers so that you're overwhelmed. I kind of go layer happy in the end here, just because it's a piece for me. If it was client work, I usually like to keep it a lot more organized, so if they request changes, it's a very easy process. But yeah, once we have our colors laid in, it's a really good idea to start just painting opaquely on top of things. I just call this painting opaquely, but it's using a normal layer above everything, and just color picking what we've already established and adding a couple new colors of our own choice to keep things poppy and fun, adding areas of contrast and interest. But yeah, the main objective here was just to give you guys a follow-up to the beginner drawing course, because that had a lot of success and people really loved learning how to draw at its basis, but the next logical step is learning how to paint. So what I wanted to do was kind of make that transition as smooth as possible, because for me, I had a really hard time figuring out painting, and a lot of my stuff looked really bad and really muddy and unclear forever, because painting was this nebulous endeavor. And I knew how to draw too. I could draw okay, back when I started painting when I was around 19. And it made it really frustrating, because I would just be doing all these paintings and I was thinking they were looking good, but when I got professional feedback, everybody kept saying muddy, 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 and it really hurt for a while. And I wanted to make sure that, as aspiring artists, as you're watching this, you want to learn how to paint. You want to be able to take the concepts in your head and apply them with a process that's going to work for you. So I just wanted to give you a structure, and I learned this structure from Kwang Ho, who is a master painter, and he paints traditionally. And he's like, if your drawing works, your values work, and your edges work, then it really will allow you to create a fuller and richer image, because color can just lay on top of all of that. The base structure is there in grayscale and in the drawing. Now I'm paraphrasing from him, and I don't actually know him. I've listened to him on YouTube, and I've watched a couple of his tutorials, and I highly recommend them, by the way, once you get a little more advanced. But since you're a beginner most likely, or you want to brush up on your fundamentals, this course is the course for you. Basically, I'm just going in now and painting the face, adding a couple final effects. I knew that in order to have a solid drawing, the face was going to need to be be looking fairly decent. It has to read with the rest of the figure. And so I size up the face a little bit because it was kind of tiny, especially in contrast to that nice big bandana. And then I start adding some effects for the hands and just creating some other elements that add interest to the picture plane. I also show you some really cool effects and layer effects to keep this image interesting as we progress here. Like here's some color dodging effects for the hands, adding light to a couple areas, painting over the skin again, and just simple stuff like that. It's really a very fun way to go about it. And I keep on tweaking the face and tweaking the silhouette, painting around it, making sure that it's looking good, because if the face doesn't work, then the image doesn't really work if it's a figure. I mean, it's funny because a painting I saw just sold for about $6 million and the face was so off. It was ridiculous, but they saw value in it. So even if your face game or your anatomy's not 100% on point yet, don't feel too bad, because somebody will still buy your stuff at some point. Going in and adding a couple final details, touching it up, some more hair, going in with one of my favorite Gaussian blur effects to keep the figure coming forward, because we didn't work too much on the background in this case. And then I just show you a couple ways to add a couple more adjustments or effects. I just play with it a little bit. And the final image is actually in the description box if you want to go take a look at that. I just have a link to it. And then I have one little demo at the end here for more of a landscape approach and a straight to color approach, because I know you guys want to know that as well. So what I do here is I just create a very dark canvas and work with very saturated colors. And I start thinking in terms of color mostly as I move forth. And after I have color established, then I work with light. And it's really easy to go from dark to light. So after I get a cool temperature and a warm temperature color, which you're seeing me do right now, then I begin to lay in some light. And the light is what starts to give life to the image, because light is how we perceive everything. It's how the rods and cones in our eyes work. So I explained this more in depth in the full tutorial, and like I said, it's not sped up 800% or 8 times. But like I said, this is really good for just the purposes of demonstrating some of the concepts that I talk about in the course and bring them full circle, because I want you guys to be able to get value from this even if you don't have the money to buy it right now, or you don't actually want the full course. I still want to provide value to you as artists and make sure that you are getting some tidbits and some tips. If you walk away with one nugget from this talk, then I've done my job. Alright, so that pretty much wraps it up for this succinct overview of the final lesson, week 8, in the beginner painting course. The full lesson is about 2 hours long and jam-packed with art lectures and goodness and tips and tricks, and a slower process, obviously. Final images coming up here. Here is the beginner painting course, some of the images in that course, and the final demo up in the corner there in thumbnail format. But yes, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate all your support. Don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and the link's in the description box if you do want the course. Other than that, I will see you in the next video. Happy drawing, happy painting. Talk soon.